Okay, so let's move on. The next area is the next tab, shall I say, is basically this region of interest. And what this does is, if we select the tab, you'll notice that I can basically select an area or point of interest on your screens. What will happen is, by default, it's usually kind of set like this. So let me just set it back. And if I click on this, that's what you see. You don't see nothing. However, what you would need to do is basically just drag your crosshair and point to a region of interest, like so. And this focus is After Effects focus its efforts towards this area of interest. By default, the background in After Effects is black, so don't worry about that. So this is another mechanism inside After Effects that basically speeds up our process of rendering. So for example, I could render that out full, or I could put it to half. I'll leave it at full, and I can kind of just render that out, and that will only render that area out of region of interest. So it's another protocol of speeding up our rendering inside After Effects. As stated before, After Effects will impose and slow down your machine a lot. It's very processor hungry, and it's very RAM hungry as well. Unless you've got a fast machine, and depending on what exactly you want to do with After Effects, it will slow down your machine. So these are kind of inbuilt mechanisms that help us render out footage or sequences or clips of areas of interest that we want to in high resolution. So we can go ahead and do that. Also, another quick feature, if I remember correctly, what we can do is we can crop our composition according to this area as well. So if I go to composition and go to crop composition to region of interest, and what that basically does is crops our whole composition towards that area of interest, so I will get that oblong feature. If I click that tab off, it basically shows me the rest of my footage. Moving on, if I select this, which is the next tab, and it's basically to do with transparency, and it's the transparency grid, just like Photoshop. If I click that off, if I move this and now click this, you'll see that it's basically looks like Photoshop background, and we're working with transparencies. Again, I'll come back to this, I'll show you how this works. We then have active camera. Basically this is to do with your active cameras once we're in 3D mode. I'll come back to this. We can just pan from our different cameras, front, left, top, right, bottom, and so forth. The same again with the views, really to do with camera paths. If I continue, this basically is to do with larger monitors to switch between aspect and pixel ratio, toggle between pixel ratio, and fast previews. Again, I'll come back to this. We can basically view a wireframe, but it's not going to work because I'm not in 3D mode. I'll come back to this tab, and we've then got the timeline, which basically switches over to our timeline, something that I'll come back to again. And we've finally got our wireframe. Now, the wireframe is really important because it can give us a basic wireframe model of our creative process. So if I click this tab here, you can see that my sequence 1 is, my composition is built up of the sequence 1 movie and my audio file, if I had an audio file associated with that as well. So basically we can show this wireframe to a client or to a project manager or whatever, and it basically will show us what this composition is made up of. Now, this is a very basic and a very simple composition within its infancy. However, if it was a detailed composition, it would kind of detail all of those areas. So it would have text, it would have sound, it would have squares, flash files, Photoshop files, and it will basically say all sequence 1, which is my composition name, is built up of all these different elements. So it's quite cool, very handy to have. We can close that and we can go back to our sequence there. We've then got the exposure lock, or reset exposure is basically in preview mode, enables us to go through the F points just like you would in photography to set our exposure time. So what we can do is we can click this and we can go back and drag those numerical values up or down, and basically we're increasing or decreasing the exposure. So we're allowing more light in, and we're not allowing more light in, so we're closing the exposure and we're opening the exposure wider, and that's only in preview mode. I'll show you again these last few features will make more sense when we're actually using them natively inside After Effects, but that's kind of all I want to cover within the composition panel to kickstart us inside After Effects CS3.